The scorching Arizona sun beat down mercilessly as Thomas Emerson's land came up for auction on that fateful summer day in 1875. Clara Edwards watched from beneath the shelter of the courthouse porch, her heart aching as the auctioneer's gavel hovered in the air. Her father had been Thomas's closest friend, and she had promised the dying man she would ensure his daughter Tessa got a fair price for the ranch after his passing from consumption. "Do I hear $300 for the Emerson property?" 300 acres of prime grazing land with water rights to Cottonwood Creek. The auctioneer's voice carried across the crowd of ranchers, businessmen, and curious onlookers gathered in Redemption Springs. Clara knew the property was worth at least $3,000, but the vultures had descended. Tessa Emerson stood beside her, trembling slightly, her honey-colored hair tucked neatly beneath a modest bonnet, her green eyes rimmed with the remnants of tears she had shed for weeks. $300 from Mr. Hargrove, the auctioneer announced. William Hargrove, the owner of the largest cattle operation in the territory, smiled smugly. He had been eyeing the Emerson water rights for years, and now with Thomas dead, he saw his opportunity. 350. Called another voice, Jenkins from the bank, likely bidding on Hargrove's behalf to create the illusion of competition. Clara squeezed Tessa's hand. "Don't worry," she whispered. "This isn't over." Just then, a tall figure pushed through the crowd. He wore a dusty black hat pulled low over his eyes and a worn leather vest over a simple cotton shirt. His spurs jingled softly with each deliberate step until he stood directly before the auctioneer's platform. $3,000, he stated clearly, his voice deep and unwavering. A hush fell over the crowd before it erupted into disbelieving laughter. Hargrove's booming guffaw rose above the others. "3,000 for that dried-up piece of dirt," Hargrove hooted. "Boy, you're either drunk or simple in the head." The stranger slowly turned to face Hargrove, pushing his hat back to reveal piercing blue eyes set in a sun-bronzed face. A thin scar ran along his jawline, disappearing into the shadow of a neatly trimmed beard. "Laugh again," he said evenly, "and I'll buy your silence too." The laughter died instantly. There was something in his tone, not a threat, but a promise that silenced even Hargrove. "The name's Cooper Lawson," he announced, loud enough for everyone to hear, "and I'm prepared to pay in full right now." He patted the saddlebag slung over his shoulder. The auctioneer, recovering from his surprise, cleared his throat. "Well then, do I hear any bids above $3,000? Silence reigned. Hargrove's face had turned a mottled red, but he made no counteroffer, going once, going twice. "Sold to Mr. Cooper Lawson for $3,000. As the crowd dispersed, muttering in confusion and disappointment, Cooper approached Clara and Tessa. Up close, Clara noticed the flecks of gold in his blue eyes and the way his gaze softened when it landed on Tessa. "Miss Emerson," he said, removing his hat, "I believe this property rightfully belongs to you. I'm just ensuring it stays that way." Tessa stared at him, confusion evident in her expression. "I don't understand, Mr. Lawson. We've never met." "No, madam, we haven't," Cooper replied. "But your father once saved my life during a blizzard 5 winters back. I was passing through, got caught in the storm. He took me in, nursed me back to health, said I was welcome anytime." A smile touched his lips. "I reckon this is my chance to repay that kindness." "The property is still yours," Clara said suspiciously. "What's the catch?" Cooper shook his head. "No catch, miss." "Edwards, Clara Edwards. Miss Edwards, I'm simply honoring a debt. The land remains Miss Emerson's. I'll sign whatever papers necessary to make that official." Tessa's eyes welled with tears. "Mr. Lawson, I can't accept such generosity. $3,000 is a fair price," Cooper interrupted gently, "and I insist. Your father was a good man." 2 hours later, after visiting the bank and the county clerk, the paperwork was complete. Cooper had purchased the land and immediately transferred ownership back to Tessa, refusing to take a single dollar in return. As they stood outside the clerk's office, Tessa finally found her voice again. "Mr. Lawson, at least let me offer you dinner. It's the least I can do." Cooper hesitated, then nodded. "I'd be honored, Miss Emerson." That evening, seated at Tessa's modest dining table in the small house in town where she had moved after her father's death, Cooper revealed more of himself. He was 30 years old, born in Missouri, and had spent the last decade drifting through the territories, working as a ranch hand, occasionally as a shotgun messenger for stagecoaches, and most recently as a cattle buyer for Eastern investors. "And what brings you back to Redemption Springs now, Mr. Lawson?" Clara asked, still not entirely convinced of his motives. Cooper set down his fork. "Truth be told, I heard about Thomas's passing. News travels even to Wyoming. I remembered his kindness and thought I might pay my respects." His gaze shifted to Tessa. "When I arrived yesterday and learned the ranch was being auctioned, I knew I had to intervene. But $3,000, Tessa protested again. "It's too much." "It's exactly what the land is worth," Cooper insisted. "Hargrove and his cronies were trying to rob you blind." Clara studied him across the table. There was something more in his eyes when he looked at Tessa, something beyond obligation or repaying a debt. "Where are you staying, Mr. Lawson?" Clara asked. "The Pioneer Hotel for now." "And your plans?" Cooper paused, considering. "I thought I might look for work locally. I've saved enough to perhaps start a small ranch of my own someday." Tessa suddenly brightened. "The foreman position at my father's ranch, our ranch, is vacant. Mr. Peters left after father died. I've been unable to manage it properly from town." "Tessa," Clara cautioned, "you hardly know Mr. Lawson." "He knew my father," Tessa countered, "and father was an excellent judge of character." She turned to Cooper. "The position includes the use of the foreman's cabin." "It's modest but comfortable." Cooper seemed genuinely surprised by the offer. "Miss Emerson, that's generous, but are you certain?" "Absolutely," Tessa said firmly. "You've given me back my future. Let me offer you a position worthy of your skills," and so it was decided. Cooper would begin the following day, riding out with Tessa to assess the ranch's condition and meet the remaining hands. As Clara walked home that evening, she couldn't shake the feeling that something momentous had just begun, something beyond a simple business arrangement. The Emerson Ranch sprawled across a valley nestled between two gentle ridges, with Cottonwood Creek running through its heart. The main house stood on a small rise, a two-story structure built of locally quarried stone and timber. Nearby stood a barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings, including the foreman's cabin, a snug one-room dwelling with a stone fireplace and sturdy porch. When Cooper and Tessa arrived the next morning, they found only 3 ranch hands remaining. Miguel Vasquez, an experienced vaquero who had worked for Thomas for 15 years. Young Billy Thompson, barely 18 and eager to prove himself. And Tobias Washington, a freed slave who had made his way west after the war and found employment with Thomas, who judged men by their work ethic, not the color of their skin. "Miss Tessa," Miguel called out as they rode into the yard, "it is good to see you home." "Hello, Miguel," Tessa replied warmly, dismounting. "This is Mr. Cooper Lawson. He's our new foreman." Cooper dismounted and extended his hand to each man in turn, looking them directly in the eye and greeting them respectfully. Tobias seemed particularly surprised by the gesture. "Mr. Lawson bought the ranch at auction yesterday," Tessa explained, "and then transferred it back to me." The men exchanged confused glances. "It's a long story," Cooper said. "But what matters now is getting this operation back on its feet. I'll need each of you to bring me up to speed on what we're working with." Over the next few hours, Cooper learned the current state of the ranch. Approximately 200 head of cattle remained scattered across the property. Fences needed mending. The spring roundup had been only partially completed after Thomas fell ill, and without proper supervision, the work had fallen behind. "We can make this right," Cooper assured Tessa as they sat on the porch of the main house later that afternoon. "It will take time and hard work, but this is still a viable operation." Tessa tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the afternoon sun catching the golden highlights. "Thank you for your confidence, Mr. Lawson. I've been so overwhelmed since Father's passing." "Cooper," he corrected gently. "If we're to work together, please call me Cooper." She nodded, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "Cooper, and you must call me Tessa." That evening, after helping Cooper settle into the foreman's cabin, Tessa reluctantly returned to town. I'll come back tomorrow, she promised. There's still so much to discuss. Cooper watched her ride away, silhouetted against the setting sun, and felt something stir within him that he hadn't experienced in years, a sense of purpose, of belonging. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. Cooper worked from dawn until dusk, riding the property, mending fences, locating and counting cattle, and planning the delayed roundup. He hired 4 additional hands, bringing their workforce to a reasonable level for the work ahead. Tessa rode out daily, spending more and more time at the ranch, often working alongside Cooper. She proved herself knowledgeable about the operation, having learned at her father's side for years. By mid-July, she had moved back into the main house permanently, feeling truly at home for the first time since her father's death. One evening, as Cooper sat on the porch of his cabin repairing a bridle, Tessa approached with 2 glasses and a bottle of her father's whiskey. "I thought you might welcome some company," she said, settling beside him on the porch steps. Cooper set aside his work and accepted the offered glass. "Always," he replied with a smile that transformed his usually serious expression. They sipped in comfortable silence as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "Why did you really come back?" Tessa asked suddenly. "It wasn't just to repay a debt to my father, was it?" Cooper studied his glass, turning it slowly in his hands. "Your father saw something in me I didn't see in myself," he finally said. "During that blizzard, I was at my lowest point. I'd been drifting for years, running from my past, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots." He looked up at the stars. "Thomas talked to me for hours while the storm raged, told me about this valley, about building something that lasts, about you." He glanced at her. "He was so proud of you, Tessa, said you had your mother's gentle heart and his stubborn determination." Tessa smiled through sudden tears. "He always said that. Before I left, he made me promise that if I ever decided to stop running, I'd come back here, said good land and good people were worth fighting for." Cooper took another sip of whiskey. "When I heard he'd passed, I knew it was time to keep that promise." Tessa reached out hesitantly, her fingers lightly touching the scar along his jaw. "And is this part of what you were running from?" Cooper didn't flinch from her touch, though he closed his eyes briefly. "Part of it. The war left marks on all of us who fought, some visible, some not." "You fought for the Union," he nodded. "Missouri was divided. My family sided with the North. Our neighbors didn't appreciate that choice." The unspoken weight of his words hung between them. Tessa didn't press for more, understanding that some wounds needed time to heal before being exposed to the light. As the weeks passed, Tessa and Cooper fell into a comfortable routine. They breakfasted together in the main house, discussing the day's work. Cooper would then ride out with the men, while Tessa managed the household and accounts. In the evenings, they often shared dinner, sometimes joined by Clara, who had become a frequent visitor to the ranch. Clara watched their growing closeness with a mixture of approval and concern. One afternoon in early August, as she helped Tessa preserve peaches from the small orchard behind the house, she finally spoke her mind. "You're falling in love with him, aren't you?" Tessa nearly dropped the jar she was filling. "Clara." "Don't Clara me," her friend replied with a knowing smile. "I've known you since we were girls. I see the way you look at him and the way he looks at you when he thinks no one is watching." Tessa carefully sealed the jar before responding. "He's a good man, kind, hardworking, honorable." "And handsome," Clara added with a grin. Tessa couldn't help but laugh. "Yes, and handsome, but he's also guarded. There's so much about his past he keeps locked away." Clara's expression grew serious. "Some men carry burdens they believe are too heavy to share. But that doesn't mean they carry them forever." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of horses in the yard. Cooper had returned earlier than expected, and from the commotion, he wasn't alone. Tessa wiped her hands on her apron and hurried to the front door. Cooper was dismounting, along with a man Tessa didn't recognize, tall, expensively dressed, with a meticulously groomed beard and cold eyes that assessed the property with naked calculation. "Ah, Miss Emerson, I presume." The stranger called out, striding toward her with an outstretched hand and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Harrison Blackwell at your service. I represent Western Cattle and Land Company out of Denver. Tessa accepted his handshake briefly. Mr. Blackwell, what brings you to our ranch? Business, my dear lady, the most fortuitous kind. He gestured expansively. I've been authorized to offer you $5,000 for this property, a most generous sum, I'm sure you'll agree. Cooper moved to stand beside Tessa, his expression stony. Mr. Blackwell arrived at the south pasture where we were working. I explained that the ranch wasn't for sale, but he insisted on speaking with you directly. Blackwell's smile tightened. 5,000 is considerably more than this land is worth in its current condition. With the drought conditions spreading from the south, cattle prices falling, and your limited resources, it's an opportunity you would be foolish to dismiss. Clara had joined them on the porch, her eyes narrowed with suspicion. How interesting that you mention drought, Mr. Blackwell, when our water rights to Cottonwood Creek are the most secure in the county. Blackwell's gaze flickered to Clara, dismissive. And you are a friend who recognizes a wolf in fancy clothing, Clara replied coolly. Tessa straightened her shoulders. Mr. Blackwell, thank you for your offer, but as Mr. Lawson informed you, this ranch is not for sale, not for $5,000, not for $10,000. Blackwell's pleasant facade slipped for just a moment, revealing something hard and calculating beneath. Miss Emerson, perhaps you should consider more carefully. Running a ranch is difficult work, especially for a woman alone. She's not alone, Cooper stated firmly. Blackwell looked between them, a new understanding dawning in his eyes. I see. Well, my offer remains open for 30 days. Should you reconsider, I'm staying at the Grand Hotel in town. He tipped his hat. Good day, Miss Emerson, Mr. Lawson. Madam, as Blackwell rode away, Clara muttered, I don't trust that man as far as I could throw him. Nor should you, Cooper agreed. Western Cattle and Land has been buying up ranches all through Colorado and Wyoming. They use whatever tactics necessary, legal or otherwise, to get what they want. Tessa shivered despite the August heat. Do you think he'll cause trouble? Cooper's expression was grim. It's almost guaranteed. His prediction proved accurate sooner than any of them expected. The following week, Miguel reported finding a section of fence cut along the northern boundary, allowing a dozen cattle to wander onto neighboring land. Days later, Billy discovered someone had tampered with the creek dam that diverted water to their primary grazing pasture. Cooper doubled the night patrols and sent word to the sheriff about the vandalism, though he held little hope for official intervention. Sheriff Dobbs was known to look the other way when sufficient money crossed his palm. One evening in late August, Cooper returned from town with troubling news. He found Tessa on the porch, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of crimson and gold. Blackwell's been busy, he said without preamble, settling into the chair beside her. He's convinced the bank to call in your father's outstanding loan immediately. Tessa turned to him, alarmed. What loan? Father paid off the mortgage years ago. Apparently he took a small loan last year for cattle and improvements. Nothing unmanageable with normal payment terms, but Blackwell's pressured the bank to demand full repayment within 30 days. How much? Tessa asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. $1,200. Tessa calculated quickly. They had less than $400 in the ranch account. The fall cattle sale was still months away. We could sell some stock early, she suggested. Cooper shook his head. Prices are down and Blackwell knows it. We'd have to sell too many head, leaving us vulnerable for next year. Then what do you suggest? Cooper was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. I have savings, he finally said, about $900 kept in a bank in Denver. Cooper, no, Tessa protested immediately. You've already done too much. It's an investment in our future, he countered, then paused, seeming startled by his own words. In the ranch's future, he amended, but the slip hadn't gone unnoticed. Tessa reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. Our future, she repeated softly. I like the sound of that. Their eyes met, and the world around them seemed to still. Cooper leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, but Tessa closed the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a gentle, questioning kiss that quickly deepened with shared longing. When they finally parted, Cooper rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since the first day I saw you at the auction," he confessed. Tessa smiled. "I've wanted you to since the moment you stood up to Hargrove." Cooper laughed softly, then grew serious. "Tessa, there's something you should know about me, about my past, before this goes any further." She placed her fingers gently against his lips. "Whatever it is, it doesn't change who you are now, the man I've come to know, but if telling me will ease your burden, I'm here to listen." Cooper took a deep breath. "After the war, I rode with a group of men who called themselves regulators. We hunted down war criminals, Confederate officers who had committed atrocities. At least, that's what we told ourselves." His voice grew tight. "The truth is, we became no better than those we hunted. Vengeance replaced justice." He touched the scar on his jaw. "This came from the last man I confronted, a colonel who had ordered the execution of Union prisoners. He got his knife into me before I—" Cooper's voice faltered. "Before I killed him. And as he lay dying, he told me he had a wife, children who needed him. That's when I saw what I had become." Tessa remained silent, her hand still in his, offering wordless support. "I left that life behind," Cooper continued. "Started drifting, trying to outrun my guilt. That's when the blizzard caught me and your father took me in." He finally met her gaze. "Your father was the first person who made me believe I could be more than my worst mistakes." Tessa reached up to trace the scar on his jaw, her touch infinitely tender. "My father was right," she said simply. "You are so much more than your past." Cooper closed his eyes, overwhelmed by her acceptance. When he opened them again, there was a new lightness in his expression, as though a weight he had carried for years had finally been lifted. The next morning, Cooper prepared to leave for Denver to withdraw his savings. As he saddled his horse, Tessa approached with a small leather pouch. "Take this," she said, placing it in his hand. "My mother's brooch and earrings. They should fetch another 200 at least." Cooper hesitated. "Tessa, these are family heirlooms." "And the ranch is my family's legacy," she replied firmly. "Besides, jewelry can be replaced. This land, this home we're building together, that's irreplaceable." Cooper carefully tucked the pouch into his saddlebag, then pulled Tessa into his arms. "I'll be back in 4 days," he promised. "Stay vigilant while I'm gone. I don't trust Blackwell not to try something in my absence." "Clara's coming to stay," Tessa assured him. "And Miguel has organized the men to keep watch." Cooper kissed her goodbye, lingering as though memorizing the feel of her in his arms. 4 days, he repeated, then mounted and rode away, looking back once to see her standing in the yard, hand raised in farewell. The first 3 days of Cooper's absence passed without incident. On the 4th day, as Tessa and Clara were preparing dinner, the sound of approaching horses drew them to the window. Instead of Cooper's familiar figure, they saw Blackwell riding into the yard, accompanied by Sheriff Dobbs and 2 rough-looking men Tessa didn't recognize. "Stay inside," Clara instructed, reaching for the shotgun Thomas had always kept by the door. "Clara, no," Tessa protested. "We can't greet them with a weapon." "Watch me," Clara muttered, but reluctantly set the shotgun aside when Tessa opened the door and stepped onto the porch. "Mr. Blackwell," Tessa acknowledged coolly. "Sheriff, what brings you gentlemen to my property?" Blackwell dismounted with exaggerated courtesy. "Miss Emerson, I've come with unfortunate news and a proposition." "What news?" Tessa asked, her stomach clenching with sudden dread. "It seems your foreman has absconded with your valuables," Blackwell said, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "My men spotted him in Denver yesterday, selling a distinctive gold and emerald brooch at Harrington's Jewelry Emporium." "That's a lie," Clara snapped. "Cooper would never steal from Tessa." Sheriff Dobbs cleared his throat. "Miss Edwards, I have a sworn affidavit from Mr. Harrington himself confirming the transaction. The description matches items reported missing from the Emerson estate." "Reported by whom?" Tessa demanded. "I reported nothing missing because nothing is missing. I gave Cooper my mother's jewelry to sell to help pay off the loan your bank has suddenly called due," she added, glaring at Blackwell. Blackwell's expression hardened. "A convenient story, Miss Emerson, but where is Lawson now?" "He should have returned by yesterday if his intentions were honorable." Before Tessa could respond, the sound of a single rider approaching drew everyone's attention. Cooper appeared around the bend in the road, pushing his horse hard. He pulled up sharply when he saw the gathering in the yard, his hand instinctively moving toward his gun. "Cooper," Tessa called out in relief, starting toward him. Sheriff Dobbs stepped between them. "Hold it right there, Lawson. I have questions regarding some property you recently sold in Denver." Cooper dismounted slowly, his eyes never leaving Tessa's. "I sold a brooch and earrings at the owner's request," he stated calmly. "I have the proceeds right here along with my own savings to pay off the Emerson loan." He patted his coat pocket. "A likely story," Blackwell scoffed. "Sheriff, arrest this man. He's clearly a thief and a swindler." "The only swindler here is you, Blackwell," came a new voice from the road. Everyone turned to see Clara's father, Judge Edwards, riding up alongside another man Tessa recognized as the territorial marshal. "Judge Edwards," Sheriff Dobbs stammered, suddenly looking considerably less confident. "I didn't expect to see you out this way." "Clearly," the judge replied dryly. He dismounted with the dignity of his 60 years and straightened his coat. "Marshal Reynolds and I have been reviewing some very interesting documents concerning Western Cattle and Land Company's business practices in this territory." Marshal Reynolds, a weathered man with a steely gaze, nodded. "Including evidence of bribery, intimidation, and fraud in land acquisitions." Blackwell's face had gone pale. "These are outrageous accusations. I represent a legitimate business enterprise." "Save it for the territorial court," Marshal Reynolds advised. "Sheriff Dobbs, unless you want to be charged as an accomplice, I suggest you remove those cuffs you're holding and step away from Mr. Lawson." Dobbs complied immediately, backing away from Cooper with his hands raised. "Just doing my duty based on the information provided," he muttered. Judge Edwards turned to Tessa. "Mr. Lawson telegraphed me from Denver, concerned about the irregular nature of your loan recall. He asked me to look into Western's activities while he secured the funds. Marshal Reynolds has been investigating them for months." Cooper crossed to Tessa's side, taking her hand. "I'm sorry I'm late. I wanted to make sure we had proper legal protection before returning." Tessa squeezed his hand, blinking back tears of relief. "You're here now, that's what matters." Marshal Reynolds approached Blackwell. "Harrison Blackwell, you're under arrest for fraud, attempted extortion, and conspiracy to commit land theft. Your associates in Denver are already in custody." As Reynolds handcuffed a protesting Blackwell and led him to his horse, Judge Edwards addressed Tessa and Cooper. "The loan recall has been deemed illegal and is hereby nullified. You'll have the original payment schedule reinstated." "Thank you, Judge Edwards," Cooper said sincerely. "Your intervention saved more than just the ranch today." The judge smiled, his eyes twinkling as he looked between Cooper and his daughter. "Clara informed me there might be a personal interest involved as well." He winked at Tessa. "Your father would approve, my dear." After the judge, marshal, and their prisoners departed, Clara hugged Tessa fiercely. "I'll head back to town with father," she said. "I think you two have some catching up to do." With a knowing smile, she mounted her horse and followed her father down the road. Left alone in the yard, Tessa and Cooper stood in the golden light of the setting sun, hands still intertwined. "I thought I might lose everything," Tessa admitted softly. "The ranch, my future, you," Cooper gently tilted her chin up. "You'll never lose me," he promised. "These past months with you have given me something I never thought I'd have again, a home, a purpose." He hesitated, then continued, "And if you'll have me, I'd like to make it official." Tessa's eyes widened. "Cooper Lawson, are you proposing to me in my dusty front yard while we're both exhausted from the most stressful day imaginable?" A slow smile spread across his face. "I reckon I am." "Is that a problem?" Tessa laughed, the sound pure and joyful. "It's perfect," she declared, throwing her arms around his neck. "Yes, Cooper, yes, I'll marry you." Cooper lifted her off her feet, spinning her in a circle as he kissed her, both of them laughing and crying at once. 2 months later, on a crisp October day, Tessa Emerson became Tessa Lawson in a ceremony performed by Judge Edwards in the town church. Clara served as maid of honor, while Miguel stood proudly as Cooper's best man. The entire community turned out to celebrate, the memory of Blackwell's schemes long overshadowed by the genuine joy of the occasion. As Cooper and Tessa danced beneath the stars at their wedding celebration, held in the Emerson Ranch yard, William Hargrove approached them, hat in hand. Mrs. Lawson, Mr. Lawson, he greeted them, uncharacteristically humble. I owe you both an apology for my behavior at the auction. I was less than gentlemanly. Cooper nodded, his arm secure around Tessa's waist. Water under the bridge, Hargrove. I was wondering, Hargrove continued, if you might consider a business proposition a legitimate one, he added hastily. My cattle operation could benefit from access to your creek during the dry months, and in exchange I could offer grazing rights on my north pasture during winter. Cooper and Tessa exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. We'd be open to discussing it, Tessa replied. Come by next week and we'll talk terms. Hargrove nodded, relieved, and rejoined the celebration. As he walked away, Cooper chuckled. Look at you, already negotiating like a seasoned rancher, he said admiringly. I learned from the best, Tessa replied, resting her head against his shoulder as they resumed their dance. My father always said the true measure of success wasn't in what you owned, but in how you lived. Wise man, your father, Cooper murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. He would have been proud today, Tessa said, seeing his daughter happy and his ranch thriving. I think he orchestrated this whole thing, Cooper confessed. That night during the blizzard, he showed me your photograph and told me you'd need a good man someday. He smiled at the memory. I think he was matchmaking even then, Tessa laughed. That sounds like father, always planning 3 steps ahead. As the evening progressed and the celebration continued around them, Cooper led Tessa away from the crowd to the small rise behind the house, where Thomas Emerson was buried beneath an old oak tree. In the moonlight, they stood hand in hand before the simple headstone. Thank you, Cooper said softly to the silent grave, for seeing something in me worth saving, for trusting me with your greatest treasure. He squeezed Tessa's hand. I promise to honor that trust every day for the rest of my life. Tessa leaned against him, her heart full. He knew what he was doing when he invited you in that night, she said. Just as you knew what you were doing when you placed that bid, Cooper smiled, remembering the day that had changed everything. Best investment I ever made, he said, drawing her into his arms. And I didn't even have to buy Hargrove's silence after all. Tessa laughed, the sound carrying across the moonlit ranch, their home, their future. 1 year later, as summer once again blazed across the Arizona territory, Clara sat in the shade of the Lawson Ranch porch, cradling her godson Thomas Cooper Lawson in her arms. The 3-month-old slept peacefully, oblivious to the celebratory atmosphere around him. Inside the house, Tessa was putting the finishing touches on a special dinner to mark the anniversary of Cooper's fateful bid at the auction, the day that had set their story in motion. The ranch had flourished under their joint stewardship. The cattle herd had grown to over 500 head, the partnership with Hargrove had proven mutually beneficial, and 3 neighboring smallholders had contracted with them for water rights, creating a cooperative arrangement that strengthened the entire community. Cooper rode in from the north pasture, dismounting with the easy grace that still made Tessa's heart skip a beat when she watched him from the window. He greeted Clara with a smile, bending to place a gentle kiss on his son's forehead before entering the house in search of his wife. He found Tessa in the kitchen, her sleeves rolled up as she removed a pie from the oven. Cooper paused in the doorway, taking in the domestic scene with a sense of wonder that hadn't diminished with time. Something smells incredible, he said, crossing the room to slip his arms around her waist. Tessa leaned back against him. Apple pie your favorite. My second favorite, he corrected, pressing a kiss to the sensitive spot just below her ear. You're my favorite. Tessa turned in his arms, rising on tiptoes to kiss him properly. Charmer, she accused fondly. Only with you, he assured her, resting his forehead against hers. Only ever with you. That evening, as they sat around the dining table with Clara and Judge Edwards, Miguel and his wife Alina, and young Billy Thompson, now their assistant foreman, Cooper raised his glass in a toast. To Thomas Emerson, he said solemnly, who taught me that some things are worth fighting for and some people are worth staying for. To Thomas, they echoed, glasses raised. Later, as stars blanketed the sky above the ranch, Cooper and Tessa stood on the porch of what was now very much their home, their sleeping son cradled in Tessa's arms. "You ever think about that day at the auction?" Tessa asked softly. "How different our lives might have been if you hadn't placed that bid." Cooper tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch reverent. "I believe some things are meant to be, Tessa. If not that day, somehow, someway, we would have found each other." Tessa smiled up at him, her heart overflowing with gratitude for this man, this life, this love that had begun with an outrageous bid and a promise to buy silence. "I love you, Cooper Lawson," she whispered. "And I love you, Tessa Lawson," he replied, his voice carrying all the certainty of a man who had finally found his true home. "Yesterday, today, and all our tomorrows." In their son's peaceful face, they could see the future of the ranch, the legacy they would build together, a legacy born from courage, perseverance, and a love that had proven stronger than any challenge life could present. As the Arizona night wrapped around them like a blanket, Cooper drew his family close, knowing with absolute certainty that he had found something more precious than all the gold in the Western territories. A love worth fighting for, a woman worth staying for, and a life worth living to its fullest measure. And it had all begun with those fateful words that had silenced laughter and changed their lives forever. "Laugh again, and I'll buy your silence too."